I didn't expect silence to feel so loud. After 15 years in the army, I thought I knew what peace meant. Turns out, it's not medals or ceremonies. It's the sound of tires crunching on snow when you finally drive alone with no one giving orders. My name's Laura Finch, former logistics officer, 38, recently retired. The Army sent me home with a box of plaques, a handshake, and a question I wasn't ready to answer. What now? I decided to start with something simple: solitude. My mountain lodge in Estes Park had been sitting empty for months, waiting for me. I bought it years ago, while still stationed at Fort Carson, just far enough from everything that no one could show up by accident. The kind of place you go when the noise in your head gets louder than the noise around you. I'd been picturing the moment I'd unlock that door and breathe mountain air again. Just me, a fire, maybe some bad whiskey, and a chance to remember what quiet felt like. The drive up was slow. The snow was heavier than expected, flakes thick enough to blur the road signs. My truck's heater rattled like it was complaining about retirement too. I kept one hand on the wheel, one on a thermos of black coffee. On the radio, an old country song played about coming home to nothing familiar. I laughed once, dark, short, because that part hit harder than it should have. By the time I reached the private road leading to the lodge, daylight was fading. Pines lined both sides, heavy with snow. The place looked exactly like I remembered. Steep driveway, wooden railing, the old satellite dish still hanging crooked on the side. The lodge itself was built solid oak beams, stone chimney, the kind of craftsmanship people don't bother with anymore. Except something was off. There was a car parked near the front steps. Not just any car, a white luxury SUV with dealer plates from Denver. My pulse picked up. The only person I'd ever given the spare key code to was my sister, Kimberly, for emergencies. That word emergencies didn't usually include borrow your house without asking. I parked behind the SUV and turned off the engine. Another car sat a few feet away, an older sedan half buried in snow. My gut tightened. That one wasn't hers. Probably Sean's parents. Fantastic. The house lights glowed through the windows. Music drifted outside, something upbeat, poppy, wrong for the place. My quiet cabin had turned into somebody's holiday party. I got out, boots sinking into fresh snow, the cold biting through my jeans, the smell of wood smoke, and something sweet, maybe pie, mixed with the sound of laughter. I climbed the steps slowly, hand brushing the railing, every instinct telling me to turn back to the truck and think this through. But after 15 years of making decisions under fire, hesitation wasn't exactly in my skill set. I reached the door and pressed the handle. It wasn't locked. That was my first real mistake, assuming my sister knew how to respect boundaries. Inside, heat hit me like I'd walked into someone else's life. A fireplace roared in the corner. A fake Christmas tree blinked in red and gold. People were everywhere, Sean's parents on the couch, his sister unwrapping gifts, a couple of kids I didn't even recognize running through the hall. And right in the middle, holding a glass of red wine that probably came from my cellar, was Kimberly. She saw me before I said a word. Her smile froze halfway. Then she squinted like she couldn't believe her luck or her mistake. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," she said. "What are you doing here?" I took off my gloves, calm as I could, checking on my property. Her voice sharpened. "Your property? Don't start that again. You've been gone for years. You didn't even tell me you were coming." I didn't think I needed permission to visit my own home. Zero. Sean looked up from the couch, beer in hand, trying to smile like he could charm the tension away. "Hey, Laura, we thought you were deployed again. Kim said you wouldn't be back until New Year's." "That's interesting," I said, because Kim doesn't own a calendar here. The room went quiet except for the fire crackling. Kim laughed, too loud. "Don't be dramatic. We're just keeping the place warm. You should be thanking us. I matter." My eyes swept the room trash on the coffee table, plates stacked high, my parents' framed photo missing from the mantel. In its place was a big smiling picture of Sean's family. My chest tightened. "Where's the photo that was here?" Kim shrugged. "Relax, I put it in a drawer. You don't have to get weird about everything." Weird. That was one word for it. I looked around at the mess, the strangers, the smell of wine and leftover turkey. My peace had been replaced by a cheap holiday sitcom, the kind where everyone laughs except the person paying the mortgage. Sean's mom stood up awkwardly, trying to play peacemaker. We didn't realize you'd be back so soon, dear. Kim told us you were staying overseas longer. I smiled politely. I bet she did. Kim rolled her eyes. Don't act like this is some big betrayal. You were never even here. I thought it'd be nice to have family in the house instead of it sitting empty. Isaac. Without asking first? Oh my God, Laura, you act like you're some kind of general. It's just a house. That one hit deeper than she knew. No, I said quietly. It's my house. Sean set down his drink. Maybe we should all just… Kim cut him off. No, I'm sick of her attitude. You always think you're above everyone just because you wear a uniform. She stepped closer, her breath thick with wine. What do you even want, Captain? To check if we used your precious floor too much? I stared at her. Still, calm, the way you look at a target you've already measured. What I want, I said, is to understand how my sister turned into a trespasser. That hit her pride. Her face flushed red. You're unbelievable. You can't just walk in here and… It's not walking in if it's mine. She blinked fast, then smirked, trying to recover. Fine. Call the police, see if they care. Tell them your sister's having Christmas dinner. The air in the room felt tight. Sean's parents exchanged a nervous glance. No one moved. Kim leaned closer, voice slurred but sharp. You think you scare me? You don't. You're a parasite who hides behind rules and rank. The word landed heavy. Parasite. My jaw clenched, not from anger but recognition. I'd heard that tone before from soldiers who didn't like taking orders, from civilians who thought discipline meant cruelty. I stepped forward slowly until we were face to face. Go ahead, call the police, I said. If you can find your phone between all the lies. Her fake confidence cracked for half a second, enough for Sean to grab her arm. Kim, maybe stop talking. But she didn't. You can't kick us out, Laura. We're family. I turned away, scanning the chaos again, the noise, the clutter, the heat pressing in. I felt that old instinct flicker, the one that told me when a mission had already failed. Peace wasn't in this house anymore. It was buried under their excuses. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Kim called out, "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped outside into the cold. The wind hit my face, clean and sharp, like a reset button. I stood there for a long minute, breathing the frozen air, watching my breath rise in the dark. The snow kept falling, soft but relentless, covering everything equally right and wrong, peace and chaos. Inside, the music started again. I could hear Kim's laugh through the walls, high and hollow. I looked at the truck, then back at the lodge, lights glowing behind the curtains like it was already someone else's home. And then I took out my phone. The cold stayed on my skin as I walked down the porch steps. My fingers hovered over the phone screen. I wasn't sure if I wanted to call the sheriff or just drive away and let the problem rot on its own. The snow was picking up, thick flakes swirling through the headlights of the SUV. The house behind me was alive with noise, music, voices, laughter that didn't belong. That sound crawled under my skin worse than the wind. I scrolled through my contacts until I saw the number for the Estes County Sheriff's Office. I'd called them once years ago to report a break-in attempt by a bear. It had ended with me sharing coffee with a deputy while we watched the bear wander off. This time wouldn't end with coffee. Before I could press call, the front door opened again. Kim's voice cut through the wind. "What the hell are you doing out there? You're embarrassing yourself." I turned just enough to see her standing there with no coat, holding her wine glass like a weapon. "Go back inside, Kim. You're drunk." "Drunk? I'm celebrating. You should try it sometime, instead of living like a ghost." I didn't reply. I finally hit the call button. The dispatcher answered fast, her voice calm and trained. Estes County Sheriff's Office. I gave my name, address, and said, "There are unauthorized people staying on my property." Kim's expression twisted when she realized who I was calling. "You really called the cops? Over Christmas?" "Yeah," I said, "over trespassing." She threw her hands up. "You're insane. You gave me the key code. You told me I could use the place." I said for emergencies, Kim, not for parties. End of… Her laugh was sharp and ugly. "You're unbelievable. All those years playing soldier, and now you think you're some kind of hero because you can dial 911. I looked right at her. "No, I'm just someone who follows rules. You should try it." She glared, but she didn't move. The dispatcher told me a deputy would arrive soon. I hung up and slipped the phone back in my pocket. Kim muttered something under her breath and stormed inside, slamming the door hard enough to send a puff of snow off the roof. I stayed on the porch, watching my breath fog in the air, until the sound of tires crunching up the road pulled my attention. Red and blue lights reflected off the snow, blinking across the trees. A patrol SUV came into view, the sheriff's emblem on the door. The deputy stepped out, a tall man, maybe in his 40s, calm but alert. His badge caught the light from the headlights. "Evening, ma'am. You the property owner?" "Yes, sir. Laura Finch." He nodded, looking past me at the glowing windows. "And the folks inside?" "My sister, her husband, his parents. They entered without permission." "Understood. Let's go have a talk." Inside, the mood shifted the second we stepped through the door. The laughter died like someone had hit mute. Kim stood near the fire, trying to look collected, her wine glass now empty. Sean got up too fast, almost knocking over a chair. The deputy looked around, assessing the scene. "Evening, folks. Got a report of a property dispute." Kim spoke first. "It's not a dispute. She's my sister. She said we could stay here while she was away." The deputy turned to me. "That true?" "No, sir. I've been away for work, not gone forever. I never gave permission for them to move in." Sean tried to jump in. "We didn't move in. We were just—" Kim cut him off. "We were taking care of the place. Someone had to make sure the pipes didn't freeze." The deputy's eyebrow lifted. "With 7 people and a holiday party?" Kim's tone faltered. "We were just visiting for Christmas." I stayed quiet. I'd learned a long time ago that silence can do more damage than shouting. The deputy looked back at me. "You have proof of ownership, ma'am?" "Of course." I handed him the folder I'd brought. Title deed, ID, property tax receipts. Old habit from the Army. Always keep your paperwork ready. He flipped through each page carefully, the room silent except for the sound of paper. When he looked up again, his voice was steady. "This property belongs to Captain Laura Finch." Kim laughed nervously. "Captain. She's not even active duty anymore." The deputy ignored her. "That means the rest of you are here without permission. I'm going to have to ask you to pack up and leave." Sean's mother gasped. "Tonight? But it's snowing." End of verse. Send it. "I'll give you 24 hours, he said. "After that, it becomes trespassing under Colorado law." Kim's face went pale, then red. "You can't be serious. We're family." He looked straight at her. "Family or not, the law's the law." For a second, I thought she might actually hit him. Her hand clenched around the wine glass like she wanted to throw it. But then Sean pulled her back, whispering something I couldn't hear. The deputy gave me back the folder. "Ma'am, we'll file a report tonight. I'll check back tomorrow to confirm they've left." "Thank you, deputy." When he stepped outside to make a radio call, the silence between me and Kim thickened. The others avoided my eyes, pretending to tidy up, as if stacking empty plates could erase what had just happened. Kim's voice came out low, shaking with rage. "You think this makes you some kind of winner? You've always loved humiliating me." "I didn't humiliate you," I said. "You did that yourself." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're so proud of that uniform. You think it gives you the right to look down on everyone. It gives me the right to protect what's mine." "Yeah? Protect it from who? Your own family?" "From anyone who crosses the line." That line, she never saw it coming, even though I'd been drawing it for years. All the loans I'd paid for her, the job referrals, the apartment lease under my name, every favor she'd twisted into expectation. This was just the final step. The deputy came back in, tapping the brim of his hat. "All right, folks. I expect this place cleared by tomorrow evening. Don't make me come back for the wrong reasons." He nodded once to me, then left. His SUV lights flashed through the windows as he drove off down the hill. Kim stood frozen for a moment, then pointed at me. "You really think you've won? You'll regret this." I took a deep breath. I regret letting it get this far. Sean's father quietly said, "Come on, everyone. Let's start packing." Kim rounded on him. "Don't you dare tell me what to do." He didn't answer. No one did. The fire popped in the hearth, one loud crack that echoed through the silence. I turned toward the door again. "You have 24 hours, Kim. I'd use them wisely." Her voice followed me out. "Merry Christmas, Captain. Now." I didn't respond. Outside, the night had turned darker, the snow now thick enough to swallow sound. I walked to my truck, brushing frost off the windshield, and sat inside with the engine idling. The headlights pointed at the house, glowing warm behind the curtains. For a second, I thought about going back in, maybe saying something kind just to soften the blow. But kindness wasn't what she needed. Boundaries were. And if I'd learned anything in the army, it was that blurred lines get people hurt. I put the truck in reverse, backed down the driveway, and stopped at the edge of the road. The house disappeared behind the trees as the snow kept falling, steady and silent. I rested my hands on the steering wheel, the warmth of the heater finally reaching my fingers. Tomorrow, they'd be gone. At least, that's what I told myself while the storm built over the ridge and the mountains swallowed the last bit of light. I didn't sleep much. The storm rattled the windows half the night, and my brain wouldn't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kim's face, the mix of arrogance and panic when the deputy said she had 24 hours. I'd seen that same look on soldiers who just realized the rules applied to them too. By morning, the sky had cleared. The snow glittered like it was mocking the mess that had unfolded inside my own house. I made coffee, black and bitter, and watched smoke from the chimney rise against the trees. They were still in there. I could see movement through the window, shadows pacing around like restless ghosts. At 9 sharp, the sheriff's SUV rolled back up the road. Not the same deputy this time. This was the sheriff himself, gray beard, steady eyes, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen every dumb thing people could do to each other. He parked behind my truck and gave me a small nod. "Morning, Captain Finch," he said. "We had a call about a domestic misunderstanding." "Let me guess," I said. "From my sister." He cracked half a smile. "You guessed right. She claims you changed your mind and now want them arrested out of spite." I sprayed. "That's creative," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "You'd think after all these years she'd find a new excuse." He chuckled once. "Mind if I go in and see how they're doing?" "Be my guest. Just don't step on any wine bottles." Inside, the air was thicker than before, less party, more hangover. The house smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. Kim stood near the fireplace, her arms crossed, wearing one of my sweaters. Sean was stuffing things into suitcases, moving with the speed of someone who wanted to finish before his wife noticed. The sheriff looked around calmly. "Morning, folks. How's the packing going?" Kim shot me a glare. "She called you again, didn't she?" "I didn't need to," I said. "You called first, remember?" Sean tried to play peacemaker. "We're leaving. It's just taking time to get everything together." The sheriff nodded. "That's good, but I'll still need to verify the situation so we don't have any confusion later." He turned to me. "Captain, can I see those papers again?" I handed them over. The sheriff scanned through the deed and ID, slower this time, double-checking every page. Then he looked back at Kim. "You've got any documentation saying you were given permission to stay here?" Kim hesitated. "Verbal permission. She said I could use the place." "When?" "Last year. She texted me about the key code." Got that text?" he asked. Kim froze, her mouth open for half a second too long. "It was a while ago. I might have deleted it." The sheriff handed me back the folder. "Far as the county's concerned, this property's yours, Captain. And since they've been staying here without written consent, that makes this trespassing." Kim slammed her wine glass down so hard it cracked. "You've got to be kidding me. You're really going to take her side?" "Ma'am," the sheriff said evenly, "this isn't about sides. It's about the law." Sean's parents looked embarrassed. His mother whispered, "Kimberly, please stop." But Kim was past that. "She's doing this because she hates me. She's always hated me." I kept my voice calm. "I don't hate you, Kim. I just don't enable you anymore." Her laugh was loud and sharp. "Enable me? You're unbelievable. You think paying a few bills makes you my savior? Paying your rent for 3 years and your car loan for 2 isn't a few bills," I said. "It's a career." Sean looked at me like he wanted to disappear. "She's exaggerating." "Am I?" I asked. "Because I've got receipts." The sheriff raised a hand. "All right, let's keep this civil. Here's what's going to happen. You all have until tomorrow morning to vacate. I'll file this report and check back personally. If anyone's still here by then, I'll start the paperwork for unlawful occupancy. That's not the way you want to start the new year." Kim's eyes went wide. "Tomorrow morning? You can't just throw us out in the snow. You had 24 hours, he said. You've already used 12. Sean's father sighed heavily and started zipping up a bag. Come on, Kim. Enough. No. She pointed at me, handshaking. You think this makes you powerful? You're pathetic. You hide behind your rank, behind your money, behind your stupid cabin. The sheriff gave her a long look. Ma'am, that's enough. But Kim kept going. You know what? Go ahead, kick us out. You'll be all alone again like always. No family, no friends, just your medals and your guilt. That last word hit harder than I wanted it to. She didn't know the details, but she knew where to aim. I kept my face still. Guilt's lighter than freeloaders. The sheriff cleared his throat. We're done here. Everyone understands the terms. Sean nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I stepped aside as the sheriff walked toward the door. He turned back to me before leaving. You'll want to change the code on that key box, and maybe keep the wine locked up. Good advice, I said. Once he was gone, the room went quiet again. Kim stood staring at the fire, her face unreadable. Sean was already carrying bags out to the cars. His parents helped quietly, heads down, moving fast. I stood there watching the scene like I was back in a debriefing, just observing the cleanup after a bad mission. The fireplace popped again, sending sparks up the chimney. Kim finally spoke, her voice low. You really don't care, do you? I looked at her. I cared for 15 years, Kim. I just finally ran out. She turned away, pretending to fix her hair. You know Mom would have hated this. Mom also told me to take care of you, not surrender my life to you. She didn't answer. For the first time, she looked small. Not angry, not superior, just small. I walked over to the window. The sheriff's SUV was gone, the road empty except for tire tracks. The snow had started falling again, gentle now, like the world was trying to pretend it hadn't just witnessed another family imploding. Behind me, Kim whispered, You think this is over? I didn't even turn around. No, Kim. I think it's finally starting. She didn't respond, and I didn't wait for one. I walked past the cluttered table, past the half-empty bottles and torn decorations, toward the front door. My boots crunched against the floor, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the wind picked up again, and the sound of it drowned out whatever she tried to yell after me. The snow was piling up on the porch railing, erasing the footprints from last night. I stood there for a long time, watching the white layers build and cover everything. I'd seen this kind of quiet before the calm, right before the real collapse. Inside the house, voices rose again, arguing, muffled through the walls. Same pattern as always. Blame, denial, noise. I let it wash over me and fade into the background. The air smelled clean, the kind of cold that clears your lungs. My truck was half buried now, frost climbing the windows, but I didn't mind. I leaned against the hood, took one last sip of cold coffee, and waited until the voices inside died down. When they finally did, I got back in the truck. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, staring through the windshield at my own house, glowing warm behind snow-covered glass. It didn't feel like mine yet, not really, not until they were gone for good. The heater hummed low. I closed my eyes for a second, listening to the wind hit the trees, steady and relentless, the same sound I used to hear in the desert at night when everything else stopped moving. A reminder that peace is never given. You earn it. And sometimes, you have to fight for it twice. I opened my eyes, shifted into gear, and drove back down the road, letting the mountains swallow the noise behind me. I drove into town once that morning to grab groceries and get my head straight. Estes Park was quiet that time of year. A few tourists wandered the main street, snapping pictures of elk like they'd never seen wildlife before. I parked in front of the small grocery store, bought a week's worth of supplies, and tried not to think about what was happening back at the lodge. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. 15 years in uniform had trained me to handle almost anything except family. I could plan logistics for 100 soldiers, move cargo across continents, and manage chaos under fire. But tell me to deal with one selfish sister and suddenly I was out of my depth. By the time I got back up the mountain road, it was nearly noon. The snow had started melting in the sunlight, dripping off the eaves of the cabin. I expected to find the place empty or at least quieter. I was wrong. 2 cars were still in the driveway, their trunks open, luggage scattered on the ground. The front door was wide open. From inside came the sound of shouting Kim's voice, high and sharp, and Sean's, lower but angrier. I parked, grabbed my bags, and stood there for a moment, listening. "You always do this," she yelled. "You never stand up for me." "Stand up for what?" Sean shot back. "You lied to my parents? You told them she gave you the house?" "Oh, shut up. You're just scared of her because she actually does something with her life." I dropped the grocery bags on the porch and walked in. "What's going on?" They both froze. Sean looked embarrassed, like a kid caught breaking curfew. Kim's face twisted in irritation. "You can't just barge in." I glanced around. The place was worse than before. Clothes everywhere, half-packed boxes, broken ornaments on the floor. "You had 24 hours, I said." "It's been 23. Sean exhaled. "We're leaving, okay? She's not leaving until I say so," Kim interrupted. "And I'm not done talking." I crossed my arms. "You're done." She gave me that defiant look she'd perfected since we were kids. "You love being in control, don't you? It's the only thing that makes you feel important." "Control keeps things from falling apart," I said. "You should try it." Sean's parents were standing by the door, clearly uncomfortable. His mother spoke softly. "Laura, we're so sorry. We didn't know she didn't have permission. We'll leave today, I promise." Kim snapped at her. "Don't apologize to her. She's the one ruining Christmas." Then, Sean muttered, "Kim, please." She ignored him and turned back to me. "You think this house makes you better than me? You think your little army pension means you get to treat everyone like garbage?" I kept my voice even. "You're trespassing in my home and insulting me in front of law enforcement. I'm treating you better than most would." She rolled her eyes, pacing the room. "You always talk like a manual, cold and perfect. No wonder you don't have anyone." "Oh." That hit the target, but I didn't let it show. "You're deflecting." "Maybe I am," she snapped. "Because it's Christmas, and you're throwing out your own family like we're strangers." Sean's father finally spoke up. "Enough, Kimberly. We're leaving. Now." She spun around. "No. You don't get to tell me what to do. None of you do." I looked at Sean. "You want to fix this, get her in the car." He rubbed his temples. "I'm trying." "How one?" The sheriff's SUV pulled up outside again, the same man as before. He stepped in, nodded once at me, then addressed the room. "All right, folks, I gave you a day. Time's up." Kim turned on him immediately. "You can't make us leave. We haven't finished packing." "You've had more than enough time," he said. "If you don't move now, I'll have to file charges." "You'd arrest me? For being in my sister's house?" He looked at her without blinking. "Yes, ma'am." And one. Sean's parents started carrying boxes out, not saying a word. Sean followed them silently. Kim stood in the middle of the room, shaking, her eyes red with fury. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "I swear you will." I stepped closer. "Kim, listen to me. You've lived off me for years. I paid for your apartment, your car, your bills. I did it because Mom asked me to look after you, not because you earned it. That stops now." Her expression flickered between anger and disbelief. "You're cutting us off?" "Yes, completely." She laughed, but her voice broke halfway through. "You can't. We'll be homeless." Sean spoke from the doorway. "Kim, stop. We'll figure something out." "Don't you dare," she said, glaring at him. "You're not leaving me too." The sheriff cleared his throat. "I'll need everyone outside, please." Kim didn't move. Her voice trembled. "You're really doing this to your own sister?" I held her gaze. "No, Kim. You did this to yourself." "Dine." Sean took her arm gently, but she jerked away. Her heel caught on the rug, and she stumbled, almost falling into the coffee table. The sheriff caught her before she hit the ground. He straightened her up, firm but calm. "That's enough. Time to go." She pulled away, brushing off her sweater. "You all think you're better than me. You'll see. None of you will be happy without me." No one answered. Sean led her toward the door, followed by his parents. The sheriff stood at the doorway until they were all outside. The wind whipped through, carrying the last of her words away. When the cars finally started down the driveway, the sound of the engines faded fast against the snow. I closed the door and locked it, then turned off the Christmas lights one by one until the room was dark, except for the fire. The sheriff lingered for a moment. You did the right thing, he said. Doesn't feel like it. Never does, he replied. Not when it's family. He gave me a small nod, then left, his boots crunching through the snow. Through the window, I watched his taillights disappear down the mountain road. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. The kind of silence that fills a place after too many words have been thrown like knives. I sat down on the sofa and stared at the mess they'd left behind, the empty glasses, the half-eaten food, the stains on my rug. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt tired, like something in me had finally snapped, and I was just waiting for the echo to fade. The fire popped again, breaking the quiet. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a second, and tried to breathe. The air smelled like burnt pine and spilled wine. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. No name, no context. But I didn't need one. I stared at it for a while before turning the phone face down. The message didn't surprise me. Kim always needed the last word, even when she'd already lost the fight. I picked up the empty glass she'd left behind and set it in the sink. The glass cracked slightly at the rim, just enough to catch my finger. A thin line of blood appeared. I rinsed it off, grabbed a paper towel, and pressed down. Outside, the wind had died, leaving the mountains still and bright under the snow. The quiet was back, but it wasn't the peace I'd imagined. It was something colder, like the air right before dawn, waiting for the next thing to break. The house was mine again, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like cleanup duty after a failed mission. I spent the next morning collecting the wreckage: trash bags, broken ornaments, empty bottles. Every room smelled like other people. Their perfume lingered on the furniture, their noise clung to the walls. I opened every window just to let it out. The silence that followed was sharp. I brewed coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching snow slide off the branches outside. The place finally looked like itself again, quiet, steady, unbothered. It should have been enough. But I knew Kim wouldn't stop with a text message. When people like her lose access to comfort, they don't reflect, they retaliate. I sat at the table with my laptop, logged into the banking app, and stared at the numbers. The joint payment accounts, the property management dashboard, the auto loan tab, all still active. For years, I'd told myself I was just helping her out. In truth, I'd been funding a slow-motion disaster. I opened the first tab, the apartment lease, under her name but my credit. Rent was due in 3 days. I clicked Terminate Autopay and confirmed. A small blue check mark appeared. It felt like cutting a cord. Next, the car loan. A shiny white SUV that she'd begged me to help finance just until Sean's job stabilized. He'd gone through 3 jobs since. I opened the finance company's site, navigated to my profile, and selected Cancel Recurring Payment. Another confirmation screen. Then came the joint card, the one she used for emergencies. Emergency apparently meant salon visits, takeout, and one memorable $600 spent on a spiritual retreat. I froze the account and requested closure. The actions were small. Clicks, checkboxes, digital acknowledgements, but they hit like clean shots. For the first time in years, I felt something close to control. I stared at the laptop screen a long while, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The quiet in the house pressed around me, but this time it didn't bother me. It felt deserved. My phone buzzed. A call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered. Hello? A pause, then her voice. You think you can just cut us off? Morning, Kim. Don't you morning me? I can't pay rent. The bank says the payment bounced. I know, I said. You know? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong. I just stopped financing your life. You can't do that. You promised. I promised Mom I'd take care of you until you could stand on your own. That was 10 years ago. Her tone cracked. You're really doing this to me? To your own sister? Kim, you've been living off my money, my property, and my patience for years. You call that family? Don't talk to me like I'm one of your soldiers. Then stop acting like one who went AWOL. Silence. Then a shaky breath. You're heartless. Maybe, but at least I'm honest. She hung up. I put the phone face down on the table and stared at the reflection in the window. Outside, snow kept falling, thick and slow. I remembered standing in the desert outside Kandahar, watching dust fall the same way, quiet but endless. Back then, I learned that silence wasn't peace. It was just what came after destruction. By noon, the house was clean. I made soup, ate at the counter, then spent an hour sorting through mail. Bills, holiday cards, a few notices from the property management company. One envelope caught my eye. The logo of the same firm managing Kim's apartment. Inside was a payment alert. Notice of non-payment. Hayes Residence. Attached was a note from the property manager written carefully. Captain Finch, we've been unable to contact your sister regarding rent. Please advise on how to proceed. I typed back a short reply. Proceed according to standard eviction protocol. No extensions. It felt cold, but necessary. When you're in command, mercy without discipline is just weakness. I closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the faint creak of the cabin in the wind. Every decision I'd made that day was logical, calculated, and final. But underneath the precision, there was something else, grief. Not for Kim exactly, but for the version of her I'd kept believing in. The one who might have grown up if I'd stopped rescuing her sooner. That night, I sat by the fire with a glass of bourbon and stared at the flames. The orange light flickered across the logs, steady and contained. I envied that. Containment? The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Sean's number. She's not handling this well. She says you'll regret it. I typed back. Tell her she's right. I already regret every dollar. Then I turned the phone off. The rest of the night passed quietly. I reread old letters from my unit Christmas greetings, updates from people scattered around the country. They all wrote the same thing. They missed the structure, the purpose. Civilian life felt too loose, too slow. I understood that more than ever. Without the mission, you start inventing battles to fight. And I'd chosen the hardest one, a family war with no victory. Sometime after midnight, the wind shifted. I heard something outside, a car engine idling faintly down the hill. I stood, walked to the window, and peered through the frost. Headlights glowed faintly between the trees. My first thought was Kim, but it didn't make sense. The sheriff had escorted them out. Still, the sound stayed steady, low. I slipped on my coat and opened the front door, the cold rushing in like a slap. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the sound was gone. Just the hush of snow and wind. I waited, scanning the road. Nothing. Probably just someone turning around. Still, I locked the door again, checked the windows, and made sure the alarm system was armed. Old habits die hard. Back on the couch, I tried to relax, but my mind kept running numbers, expenses, timelines, legal forms. For the first time, my financial life felt like my old field reports. Clear, efficient, and entirely under my control. I didn't owe Kim anything anymore. No excuses, no sympathy, no open doors. By the next morning, my inbox had filled with confirmation emails. Account closures, contract terminations, loan cancellations. I scrolled through them one by one, each message ending with a small, polite phrase, "Your request has been processed." I shut the laptop, poured another cup of coffee, and looked around the room. The house was finally quiet. Truly quiet. But somewhere deep down, I knew peace wasn't permanent. It never was. Not in combat, not in family. You don't win a war like this, you just stop showing up for it. The smell of coffee filled the air, bitter and grounding. I took a sip, set the cup down, and walked to the window again. Outside, sunlight was breaking through the clouds, cutting across the snow like gold. I watched it spread, slow and steady, and let my shoulders relax for the first time in days. Then the phone rang again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I just let it ring until the sound faded, leaving only the hum of the heater and the crackle of the fire, the kind of silence that comes right before something new starts to move. The next few weeks passed quietly, almost too quietly. Snow piled higher around the cabin, muffling the world until even my thoughts seemed to move slower. I started to get used to the stillness, coffee in the morning, long walks through the frozen woods, evenings by the fire with old records. It was peaceful, but peace always comes with a catch. It gives you room to think. One afternoon, while checking my emails, I saw a new message from the property management company. The subject line read, "Payment default, Hayes Residence." I clicked it open. The message was short and clinical. No payment received for January. Multiple attempts to contact tenant unsuccessful. Initiating eviction procedure per lease agreement. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't surprise I'd expected this, but something about seeing it in writing hit differently. Reality was catching up to her, and this time, there was no one left to intercept it. I closed the laptop and leaned back, rubbing my temples. For years, I'd been the safety net, the one who covered the bills, handled the phone calls, made excuses. I thought I was keeping her afloat. I was just keeping her from learning to swim. That night, the phone rang again. The number was new, but I knew who it was before I picked up. Laura? The voice was smaller than I remembered. Kim, you ruined us. I sighed quietly. You managed that on your own. You cut off the rent, the car, everything. We're broke, Laura, completely broke. Sean's parents won't help us. They say it's our problem. Maybe they're right. Her breathing turned shaky. We have nowhere to go. Sean's sleeping on the couch at his friend's place. I've been staying at a motel off the highway. You don't even care. Kim, I cared for 10 years. That's the problem. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You're just bitter. You couldn't stand to see me happy. Happy? I asked. You were living in debt and denial. That's not happiness. That's dependency with better lighting. Oh, she started to cry. Or maybe she wanted me to think she was. You're cruel. I'm tired. You're a coward. You hide behind rules and paperwork. You don't know how to love anyone. Love isn't giving someone a blank check, I said. It's letting them face what they built. Silence filled the line, heavy and uneven. Then she said something I didn't expect. Sean's leaving me. I didn't respond. He said he's done. Says I can't stop blaming everyone else. He's filing for divorce. And from 7. Still, I said nothing. There wasn't anything left to say. Kim's voice broke again, smaller this time. You win. Is that what you wanted? To destroy me? No, I said quietly. I wanted you to grow up. She hung up before I could finish. I set the phone down and stared at the fireplace. The flames flickered against the glass, calm and controlled. I envied that. Control. Fire that knew where to stop. Over the next week, I stopped checking my messages. I didn't need to. The story was unfolding without me. A few days later, I ran into the sheriff at the general store. He was buying dog food and a pack of jerky. Morning, Captain, he said, tipping his hat. How's the peace treating you? Quiet, I said. Almost suspiciously so. He chuckled. That's how we like it up here. He paused, studying me. I heard about your sister. Word gets around. I nodded. Let me guess she's been busy making friends? She's been busy making trouble. Local motel manager said she's been there for 2 weeks. Got into a fight with her husband in the parking lot. Deputies had to break it up. My stomach tightened, but I didn't show it. No charges? He shook his head. Not yet. Just yelling. People like her, they want an audience more than an outcome. Yeah, I said. She's always needed one. He looked at me for a long moment. You did what you had to do. Doesn't make it easier, but it was right. Ollie. I paid for my groceries, nodded, and left. The snow was starting to melt along the road, leaving behind gray slush and the faint smell of pine. I drove home without turning on the radio. That night, I checked my emails again. Another message from the property company. Eviction completed. Tenant vacated. Unit returned to owner in poor condition. Attached were photos peeling wallpaper, broken blinds, trash left behind. A perfect metaphor for Kim's life. I scrolled through them one by one, then closed the email. I didn't save it. The next morning, the auto finance company followed up. Vehicle repossession completed. There was even a picture attached. Her white SUV, tires half buried in snow, hitched to a tow truck. I deleted that too. By now, the pieces of her world were falling faster than even she could deny. The rent, the car, the marriage, gone within weeks. She'd always lived like the world would forgive her mistakes just because she cried enough. This time, the world didn't care. Around the same time, I started sleeping better. Not long, not deep, but better. I'd wake up before dawn and watch the sky shift from black to blue over the ridge. The kind of view that doesn't fix anything but reminds you why you fought for it. The phone rang again one night near the end of February. This time, I didn't answer. It rang twice more before going silent. Then came the text. You don't understand what you've done. No name, no punctuation. Just that. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Not out of anger, just because it didn't deserve to live on my phone any longer. That evening, I cooked dinner, cleaned up, and sat by the fire again. Outside, the snow was melting into slow streams down the mountain. Inside, the house was finally steady. I pulled out a photo I hadn't looked at in years. Mom, me, and Kim at the cabin the first winter after Dad passed. Kim was 17 then, still pretending to be grown up. Mom's hand rested on both our shoulders, her smile calm, proud, tired. I traced her face with my thumb and wondered what she'd say now. Probably something simple, something like, "You did what you had to." The wood popped in the fireplace. I folded the photo back into the envelope and set it on the mantel. Peace doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it just looks like boundaries finally holding. I turned off the lights and went to bed. The night was quiet again. Too quiet, but this time it didn't feel wrong. In the distance, through the open window, I could hear water dripping from the roof as the ice thawed. Every sound was small, steady, real. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm of it settle in. Somewhere down the mountain, someone else was probably lying awake, realizing the same thing I already knew. Once the help stops, the truth starts showing up on its own. I woke before sunrise, like I always did, long before the light reached the snow outside. Old habits don't fade, they just wait. In the army, I used to wake at 0500 no matter what. Even after retiring, my body still followed the clock, like it hadn't gotten the memo that the war was over. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the first thin streaks of gray creep over the mountains. For a moment, I thought about nothing, just the sound of the coffee dripping and the wind outside. Then I saw the reflection of my medals hanging on the wall, and my mind went backward without permission. Kandahar, the smell of sand and diesel fuel, the constant static from radios, the hum of generators that never really stopped. I remembered standing on the tarmac, the desert sun cutting through my uniform, and hearing one of my soldiers laugh at something stupid, something about bad coffee. A week later, that same soldier didn't come back from a convoy. His name was Sergeant Maria Holt, 26 years old, sharp, loud, and braver than anyone had a right to be. I'd written the report myself, neutral words, precise details, no emotion. Incident occurred during routine supply route, vehicle hit by IED. 2 casualties, 1 fatal. I'd sent it up the chain, then sat alone in the command tent, staring at the paper until the ink started to blur. After that, something in me had changed. I stopped believing in luck. Everything was logistics, schedules, weight, timing. If it couldn't be planned, it couldn't be trusted. Maybe that's why I spent years trying to control Kim's chaos. She was the only variable I couldn't calculate. The coffee had gone cold. I set the mug down and walked outside. The air was freezing but clean, sharp enough to sting the lungs. The snow crunched under my boots as I followed the path to the edge of the property. From there, I could see the valley below, white fields, quiet houses, smoke curling from chimneys. Civilization looked so small from up here, peaceful, from a distance. I'd built my life around distance. Even before I joined the army, I'd learned to keep space between myself and anything that might break. When our parents died, Kim had fallen apart. I'd gone the other way, collected, efficient, focused on action. She cried. I filled out paperwork. She dreamed. I enlisted. We were opposites orbiting the same loss. The phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the cold morning stillness. Unknown number again. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked back inside, pulled an old box from the shelf, and opened it on the table. Inside were a few things I'd carried through deployments: a photo of my unit, a folded flag, and a letter from Maria's mother. She'd sent it a month after the funeral. I unfolded it carefully. The paper had yellowed around the edges. Captain Finch, it read. Maria spoke highly of you. She said you were hard on her, but that you were fair. I want you to know she respected you. Please don't carry what isn't yours to carry. We all make choices, and she made hers with pride. I read it 3 times, then set it down. My throat felt tight. Kim's words from that last argument echoed in my head. You don't know how to love anyone. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd traded empathy for order so long ago I didn't notice when the trade became permanent. I walked to the living room and threw another log into the fireplace. The flames flared, warm against the cold room. The sound reminded me of the base generators back then, steady, necessary, always burning something to keep others alive. The past had a way of sneaking into the present like smoke through a crack. No matter how many times I thought I'd sealed it off, it found another way in. By midday, I tried to distract myself with work emails, spreadsheets, a call from a client who wanted me to consult on a logistics contract. Civilian work paid better and hurt less, but the adrenaline was gone. These days, my biggest crises were delays in supply chains, not ambushes. Around 3, the wind started to rise. The trees outside swayed, their branches creaking like bones. I heard a faint knocking sound and thought it was the shutters. Then I realized it was coming from the front porch. When I opened the door, there was no one there, just an envelope wedged under the welcome mat. No footprints in the snow. My first thought was that the wind had carried it, but that didn't make sense, it was too deliberate. I picked it up, turned it over. No name, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. You can't erase family. That was it. Handwritten, neat, almost careful. I stood there on the porch for a long time, reading the same line over and over. Then I tore it in half, dropped it into the snow, and watched the wind scatter the pieces. I went back inside, locked the door, and double-checked the windows again. I wasn't scared, just aware. The kind of awareness that never really goes away after years in uniform. As night fell, I lit another fire and sat by it, letting the warmth soak in. The letter still lingered in my thoughts, though. It wasn't Kim's style. Too calm, too measured, maybe Sean. Or maybe someone trying to make a point on her behalf. Either way, it didn't matter. I'd already made my point. Hours later, I found myself scrolling through old files on my laptop, photos from deployments, rosters, letters from soldiers who'd moved on. In one of the folders, I found Maria's last message to me. It was dated 3 days before the convoy incident. Captain, don't let the job turn you into a ghost. You're good at what you do, but don't forget to live after this. I closed the laptop. The room was dark except for the glow from the fire. She was right, and I'd failed her in that one way. I'd lived like a ghost, discipline without joy, structure without purpose. Even this cabin, my so-called peace, was just another bunker. I poured another glass of bourbon and leaned back, watching the flames curl up the log. They looked alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the eaves of the roof. Somewhere far below, maybe down the valley, or maybe just in my head, I thought I heard an engine again, low, distant, steady. I stood and looked out the window. The snow was falling again, thick and slow, erasing everything it touched. The road below was empty. I stayed there for a while, staring into the dark, the sound of the wind filling the silence, not thinking, not planning, just listening. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. The snow outside had turned to sleet by morning, pelting against the windows with that dull, restless rhythm that makes a place feel smaller than it is. I made coffee, same way I always did, black and simple, and sat at the table with my laptop open but untouched. Work could wait, peace apparently could not. It was around 9 when my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I didn't move. It stopped, then started again. Persistent. I let it go to voicemail, but the silence afterward felt wrong, too long, too heavy. Then it rang a third time. I sighed and answered. Yeah. For a second, there was nothing. Then her voice came through, hoarse, shaky, tired. Laura. I didn't say anything. Please don't hang up. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't slept in days. It's me, she said. It's Kim. I know. You blocked my number. I had to borrow a phone from someone at the diner. What do you want, Kim? She laughed, but it wasn't laughter, it was just noise. You sound exactly the same, like you're briefing a soldier. You called me 3 times, get to the point. X. The line went quiet again, just the sound of her breathing. Then she said, Sean left. He's gone. Filed for divorce last week. I kept my voice flat. I figured he would. He took everything. The money, the car. He even took the dog. You don't have a dog. We adopted one 2 months ago, she said quickly, like she was trying to make the lie sound real. A rescue. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So what are you asking me for? Gas money? Rent? Another chance? No, she said. I need to talk to someone who remembers me before all this. Her voice cracked at the end. I stayed quiet. She waited. I remember, I said finally. I remember a 17-year-old who said she'd never depend on anyone again. Then she spent the next 15 years doing exactly that. You make it sound so easy, she snapped. Like you've never made mistakes. I've made plenty. I just paid for mine myself. She sighed, long and shaky. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. I almost laughed. You think I've never lost anything? Try writing a letter to a soldier's mother after she dies under your command. Try watching your team drive off in trucks you're not sure will come back. She didn't respond right away. You always do that, she said finally. You make everything a war story. It's the only language you ever taught me to speak. The silence that followed was worse than the argument. For a moment, all I heard was the faint hum of the heater and the soft hiss of sleet on the glass. Then she said quietly, You were supposed to take care of me. I did. No, you were supposed to keep me safe. I did that too. You just mistook safety for comfort. Her breathing grew unsteady again. You're so cold. I'm consistent. She sniffed, and I could picture her sitting in that motel, hair unwashed, face blotchy from crying, her phone plugged into some stranger's charger. The image didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring me guilt either. Just recognition. You could still help, she said softly. I could come up there. Just for a while. Until I figure things out. No. You won't even think about it? I already did. She let out a shaky breath, half anger, half disbelief. You think you're better than me. I think I learned. That's your problem, Laura. You think life is some kind of mission you can complete and file away. But people don't work like that. You can't control everything. I know, I said. That's why I stopped trying with you. Her tone changed sharper, meaner. You like this, don't you? Sitting up there in your perfect little house pretending you're some stoic hero while your own family freezes. I like peace, Kim. You should try it sometime. I hope you choke on it, she said suddenly. I hope you sit in that big empty place and realize you'll die alone. I didn't flinch. If that's what peace costs, I can afford it. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a few seconds, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. The sleet had turned to rain now, melting the snow in steady sheets. I picked up my mug, took a sip, and grimaced at how cold it had gotten. I went to the sink, poured the rest down the drain, and let the water run until the steam cleared from the window. Outside, the road was nothing but slush and mud, now unstable, soft, temporary. I grabbed a jacket and went out anyway. The air smelled like thawed pine and wet dirt. The rain hit my hood hard enough to blur my vision. I walked to the edge of the property, to the spot where the mailbox used to be before I took it down. The ground was soft there, the snow patchy and gray. A car had stopped there recently. Tire marks cut through the slush, fresh, deep, and unfamiliar. For a moment, I stood there, staring at them, the cold water dripping from my gloves. Then I turned back toward the cabin. I'd seen enough signs in my life to know when someone wasn't done. Back inside, I toweled off, changed into dry clothes, and sat by the fire. The room glowed warm again, the kind of heat that hides more than it heals. The phone buzzed once more, a voicemail this time. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice again soft, almost calm. You were right. I need to figure things out. Don't worry about me anymore. A pause, then quieter. I don't think you could, even if you wanted to. The message ended. I replayed it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, just out of habit. The kind of habit that keeps you from carrying what's no longer yours. The rain kept falling, heavier now, drumming against the roof in a slow, relentless rhythm. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened to it fill the silence. For a while, that sound almost felt like forgiveness. Not from her, but from the world itself, the kind that doesn't need your permission to move on. The following year came quietly, the way winter fades without anyone noticing. One morning I looked out the window and realized the snow had retreated halfway up the ridge. The pine needles were showing again, slick with dew. Time has a way of erasing even the ugliest messes if you let it. I'd settled into a rhythm. The army taught me to live by schedules, and retirement hadn't changed that much. I still woke at 5, made coffee, ran a mile down the frozen road, and came back to start work. My consulting business had picked up. I managed logistics for small construction firms now. Less risk, more predictability. I liked that. Every so often, someone from my old unit called to check in. Most were doing well. A few weren't. We all carried ghosts, but at least mine had stopped shouting. Around mid-March, I drove down to town for supplies. The main street was buzzing again, tourists, spring sales, kids with hot chocolate. I stopped by the post office, nodded to the clerk, and collected a few envelopes from my box. Bills, bank statements, nothing interesting until I saw one envelope with no return address, just my name written neatly in blue ink. It wasn't Kim's handwriting. Hers was loopy, careless, full of impatience. This was tidy, deliberate. For a second, I thought of Sean. Back at the cabin, I left the mail on the counter and made lunch. I didn't open the envelope until later that night, after the fire was going. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, formal, cold. This letter is to inform you that Kimberly Hayes passed away on February 18th in Denver, Colorado. Cause of death, hypothermia, combined with alcohol intoxication. The body was identified through hospital records. Next of kin listed as Laura Finch. Arrangements for cremation pending. I read it twice. Then a third time, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. I set the paper down, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. My first thought wasn't sadness, it was disbelief. Kim was too stubborn to die quietly, too dramatic to let the world end without a witness. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago. I'd missed it sitting in that mailbox, collecting dust between coupons and credit card offers. I poured a glass of water, took one sip, and set it down. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I thought there would be shaking. Instead, there was just silence. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the window frame. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, the same one that always perched near the ridge at night. I closed my eyes and listened until the sound faded. When I opened them again, the letter was still on the table. I picked it up and read it one more time, out loud this time, to make it sound real. Then I folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope. The next morning, I called the number listed at the bottom, some clerk from the city morgue. She sounded young, too cheerful for the job. Yes, Miss Finch, we've been waiting to hear from you. We can proceed with the cremation unless you'd prefer a transfer. Proceed, I said. Would you like the ashes delivered or held for pickup? Delivered. Next. She gave a polite, I'm sorry for your loss, and that was that. I hung up and stared out the window at the mountains. The sun was just starting to hit the peaks, throwing long blue shadows over the snow. It was a beautiful morning, which somehow made it worse. For the next few days, I moved through life like everything was normal. I worked, ate, slept. At night, I sat by the fire and tried not to think about what I'd just agreed to. 3 days later, a package arrived by courier. Small, plain, unmarked except for my name. I knew what it was before I opened it. Inside was a simple urn medal, gray, no decoration, no card, no message. Just her name engraved in small letters. Kimberly Hayes, 1990, 2028. I set it on the mantel next to Mom's photo. The 2 women she'd told me to take care of both gone now. One by time, the other by choice. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but it didn't come. I just stood there, staring at that urn, thinking about the last time I saw her face angry, bitter, alive. After a while, I took the urn outside. The snow had melted enough to reveal patches of soil near the edge of the property. I dug a small hole with a shovel and buried it there. No ceremony, no words. Just quiet. When it was done, I stood for a while, hands in my pockets, watching my breath rise in the cold air. I didn't pray. I wasn't sure who would be listening. Back inside, the fire had burned down to coals. I threw another log in, sat down, and poured a drink. The bourbon burned, sharp and warm. I could almost hear her voice again, mocking, half drunk, saying something about how I always took things too seriously. Maybe she was right. Maybe I took life too seriously, and she didn't take it seriously enough. Between the two of us, we might have made one functioning adult. That night, I found myself walking the hallway, looking at the framed pictures. Dad fishing, Mom in her garden, me in uniform, Kim as a kid holding a snow globe. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in years' hope. I touched the edge of the frame, wiped away a bit of dust, and kept walking. The next morning, I went down to town again, just to get out. The sheriff was at the diner, same corner booth as always. He waved me over. "Heard about your sister," he said quietly. "Word travels fast." "Small town," he said. "You doing okay?" "I'm fine," I said, because that's what people like us always say. He nodded like he didn't believe me. "Sometimes fine just means you stop talking about it. Sometimes it means you've accepted it," I said. He sipped his coffee. "And which one is it today?" I smiled faintly. "Depends on the hour." He nodded, and that was the end of it. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the radio playing soft country tunes about lost chances and homecomings that never happened. When I left the diner, the air had warmed. Patches of grass peeked through the snow near the sidewalks. The mountains looked softer in the distance, less threatening, more alive. Driving back, I rolled the windows down and let the cold wind hit my face. It felt like something clean, something real. By the time I got back to the lodge, the sun had started to dip behind the ridge. The light turned gold across the walls, filling the room in a way that made even the quiet feel alive again. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the snowfield where I'd buried her. The ground looked untouched now, smooth, undisturbed. Somewhere out there under that frozen earth, the last piece of my old life was finally at rest, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was at war with it anymore. Spring came slower in the mountains than it did in the rest of Colorado. Down in town, the grass was already green and the streets clear. Up here, the last of the snow still clung to the shadows behind the lodge. It melted in thin streams that traced through the rocks before vanishing into the soil. I watched them one morning from the porch, coffee in hand, steam curling against the cold air. It had been 3 months since the letter. 3 months since I buried what was left of Kim's chaos beneath the frozen ground. Some mornings, I still expected the phone to ring and hear her voice sarcastic, impatient, alive. But the silence stayed, steady as the wind in the pines. People talk about forgiveness like it's a grand gesture, a single moment when you let everything go. It's not. It's a quiet decision you make over and over, every day, until one morning you realize the anger doesn't wake up with you anymore. I wasn't sure if I'd forgiven her. Maybe I just ran out of energy to hate her. The sheriff came by once that week, checking in like he always did when he had an excuse to leave town. He parked his truck, took off his hat, and leaned against the porch railing. "You've been keeping busy," he said. "As much as this place lets me." He nodded toward the woods. "Still quiet out here?" "Mostly. Just the usual foxes and the occasional tourist who thinks my driveway's a trailhead." He smiled faintly. "Better company than people." He was right about that. We talked for a while, weather, work, the usual filler conversation that says more in what it doesn't say. When he left, he gave me a small envelope. "Came through the station for you. Return address was military. Figured it might be important." After he drove off, I opened it. Inside was a single page with familiar handwriting, tight, steady, written in blue pen. The signature stopped me cold. Sergeant Maria Holt. It wasn't possible. She'd been gone for years. But when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't from her. It was a copy of a letter she'd written before her death, recovered during an archive review. They'd sent it to surviving officers. The letter was dated 2 weeks before she died. I read it out loud, quietly. "Captain Finch always tells us that discipline is a kind of kindness. At first I thought she was just strict. Now I understand. You can't protect people by giving them what they want. You protect them by giving them what they need." Below that, a short note from a staff officer explained that her letters were being preserved in an internal history project, and they wanted to thank me for my leadership. I folded the paper slowly and stared out at the trees. The timing felt like a cruel joke, or maybe something else. Maybe a reminder that the things we do right often don't feel right when we do them. That night, I sat by the fire with that letter on the table beside me. The flames crackled, soft and rhythmic, like breathing. I poured a drink but didn't touch it. I just sat there and thought about all the years I'd spent trying to save people who didn't want saving. Soldiers, family, my own sister. Maybe it was never really about them. Maybe it was about trying to prove to myself that I could still make things right. The firelight flickered against the window, casting moving shadows on the snow outside. I thought of Kim again, her face that night in the cabin, the way she'd said, "You're heartless," like it was a fact. Maybe she believed it. Maybe she needed to. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't heartless. I was just tired of bleeding for people who mistook it for generosity. Later, I took the letter from Maria and placed it in the same box that held Mom's photo and the few medals I'd kept. Not because I needed to remember, but because some things deserved to rest together. In the morning, I went outside and walked down to the edge of the property. The air smelled like thawed earth and sap. The ground where Kim was buried was bare now, the soil dark and damp. Wildflowers were starting to push through tiny purple and yellow dots against the brown. I crouched down and brushed the dirt with my hand. "You finally stopped running," I said quietly. "Took you long enough." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and something faintly sweet. For a moment, I thought of her as she'd been before everything barefoot in the summer. Hair tangled, laughing at things that didn't matter. The memory didn't hurt the way it used to. I stayed there until the cold crept through my jacket, then stood and headed back to the house. Inside, the coffee was still warm. I sat by the window, took a sip, and opened my laptop. Work emails blinked in the corner of the screen, contracts, and schedules. But one message caught my eye. It was from a young logistics officer at Fort Carson. "Captain Finch, I've read your papers on Supply Chain Command. If you're available, we'd love to have you mentor our new recruits this quarter. We could use someone with your experience." I read it twice. Then I typed a short reply. Yes, I'd be honored. The moment I hit send, something shifted. It wasn't relief or pride, just a quiet sense that maybe the things I'd learned didn't have to end here. Maybe they could build something that didn't collapse when I let go. By afternoon, the sun had broken through fully, turning the snowmelt into glittering threads that ran down the driveway. The mountains looked softer, greener, almost alive again. I took my coffee out to the porch and sat on the steps, letting the warmth of the wood seep through the denim. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like isolation. It felt earned. I watched a hawk circle high above the ridge, its wings steady against the wind. It made slow, confident loops before gliding out of sight, the kind of motion that comes from knowing exactly how much effort is enough. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the hum of the forest waking up around me, the drip of melting snow, the rustle of branches, the faint rhythm of life starting over. The war, the family, the anger, it all felt distant now, like static fading at the edge of a signal. What remained wasn't regret. It was clarity. Peace wasn't silence or stillness. It was the moment you stopped fighting ghosts and started living with what was left. The wind moved through the trees again, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like orders or memory. It just sounded like home.